The First Amendment, a balancing act. Yo, America, let's talk about freedom, baby. Specifically, the freedom to worship or not, as you please. The Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. The government can't establish or favor any religion. Practice your religion however you want, as long as you're not hurting anyone. Sometimes these clauses clash. It's a delicate balance. To understand the First Amendment, we gotta rewind back to the 1700s. Back then, America was like a teenager rebelling against its controlling parents, England. See, King George and the Church of England were tight like two peas in a pod. This meant colonists had to pay taxes to support a church they might not even believe in. Talk about a raw deal.
The Founding Fathers, those dudes in the powdered wigs, had seen enough religious persecution to last a lifetime. They were inspired by Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke, who believed in individual liberty and separation of powers.
Thomas Jefferson, the dude who wrote the Declaration of Independence, even called for a wall of separation between church and state. So, when they drafted the Constitution, they made sure to put religious freedom front and center. The Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause were their way of saying never again to religious tyranny. They wanted a nation where everyone could worship freely without government interference.
Little did they know this would lead to some serious legal battles centuries later. Stay tuned. The Establishment Clause is all about freedom from religion. It's like that friend who always insists on going to a different restaurant every time just to keep things interesting. It prevents the government from establishing a national religion or favoring one religion over another. Basically, Uncle Sam can't tell you what to believe, which is pretty awesome. This clause is all about keeping things fair and equal. It ensures that everyone has the right to practice their own religion or no religion at all without fear of discrimination. It's like a giant no trespassing sign for the government telling them to stay out of your business when it comes to faith. But here's the thing. The Establishment Clause can be a bit vague. What exactly does it mean to establish a religion? And where do we draw the line between permissible and impermissible government involvement in religion? These are questions that have kept lawyers and judges busy for centuries. But hey, at least it keeps things interesting, right? Remember Thomas Jefferson, the guy who rocked those sweet knee-high boots? Well, he's the one who came up with the whole wall of separation metaphor. He envisioned a clear divide between the church and the state, like that awkward space between your crush and their new significant other. This wall is meant to protect both religion and government from each other. It prevents the government from meddling in religious affairs, and it keeps religious institutions from gaining too much political power.
Think of it as a healthy boundary, like not borrowing money from your friends. Unless it's for tacos, then all bets are off. But just like any good wall, it has its cracks and crevices. Over the years, the Supreme Court has had to interpret the Establishment Clause in countless cases, trying to figure out just how high and wide this wall should be. It's a work in progress, but hey, Rome wasn't built in a day, right?
Section 5. Living Your Truth, the Free Exercise Clause. Now, let's talk about the other half of this dynamic duo, the Free Exercise Clause.
This bad boy is all about your right to live your truth, religiously speaking. It's like that friend who encourages you to sing karaoke at the top of your lungs, even if you sound like a dying cat.
The Free Exercise Clause protects your right to believe whatever you want about religion, even if those beliefs are considered unconventional or unpopular.
It also protects your right to act on those beliefs, like attending religious services, praying, or wearing religious clothing. Basically, it's your spiritual jam, and the government can't stop you from dancing to it.
But just like with any good party, there are limits. The government can restrict religious practices if they violate other important laws or infringe on the rights of others.
For example, you can't sacrifice a goat in your backyard in the name of religious freedom, unless it's for a really good barbecue. But even then, check your local ordinances.
Section 6. The government can't touch this, protecting religious expression.
The Free Exercise Clause is all about protecting your right to express your faith, whether it's through prayer, clothing, or even wacky rituals involving interpretive dance and a whole lot of glitter. No judgment here. It's like that friend who encourages you to be your weird and wonderful self, glitter and all.
But here's the thing. The government can't just go around restricting religious practices because they find them strange or offensive. They need a really good reason, like a compelling state interest. And even then, they have to do it in the least restrictive way possible.
It's like trying to catch a fly with chopsticks. It's possible, but it takes a delicate touch. Of course, this leads to all sorts of interesting legal challenges. What constitutes a substantial burden on religious exercise? And what is a compelling state interest that justifies restricting religious freedom?
These are questions that have kept lawyers up at night, chugging coffee and pulling their hair out. Section 7. Supreme Showdowns, Landmark Cases and What They Mean. The Supreme Court, America's ultimate legal referee, has dealt with some major First Amendment showdowns. These cases are like the legal version of the Super Bowl, with lawyers battling it out over the meaning of religious freedom.
One of the most famous cases is Engel v. Vitale in 1962. The court ruled that school-sponsored prayer in public schools violates the Establishment Clause. Basically, no more making kids pray to a specific god in school. Talk about a separation of church and state mic drop.
Then there's Burwell v. Hobby Lobby in 2014. The court ruled that closely held for-profit corporations can refuse to provide contraceptives to employees based on religious objections. This one was a real head-scratcher for some, raising questions about religious freedom versus women's rights.
And who can forget Masterpiece Cake Shop v. Colorado Civil Rights Commission in 2018? This case involved a baker who refused to make a cake for a same-sex wedding, citing his religious beliefs. The court ruled in favor of the baker, but it was a narrow decision that left many questions unanswered about the balance between religious freedom and LGBTQ+ rights.
Section 8. The Schoolyard and the State House, Religion in Public Life. The First Amendment doesn't just apply to churches and synagogues, it also plays a role in public schools, government buildings, and even your local park. It's like that friend who always knows the rules no matter where you go. In schools, students can pray silently or in groups during non-instructional time. It's a delicate dance between respecting religious freedom and maintaining a secular educational environment. The First Amendment is everywhere, shaping how we interact with religion in public life. Section 9. Whose freedom? Criticisms and controversies. The First Amendment, like any good celebrity, has had its fair share of controversies. Some argue that the Establishment Clause goes too far in separating church and state, creating a culture of hostility towards religion. Others say the Free Exercise Clause gives too much leeway to religious individuals and groups, potentially infringing on the rights of others.
One major criticism is that the clauses can be used to discriminate. For example, some businesses have used religious freedom as a justification for refusing service to LGBTQ+ individuals. This raises complex questions about where religious freedom ends and discrimination begins. Another criticism is that the clauses favor majority religions. Critics argue that the government is more likely to accommodate the beliefs and practices of larger, more powerful religions, while neglecting the needs of smaller or less mainstream faiths. Talk about playing favorites.
Section 10. Walking the tightrope, balancing rights and restrictions. Navigating the First Amendment is like walking a tightrope. On one side, you have the freedom of individuals and groups to practice their religion without government interference. On the other side, you have the need to protect the rights of others and maintain a secular government. One wrong step and the whole thing comes crashing down. Balancing these competing interests is no easy feat. It requires careful consideration of the facts, the law, and the potential impact on all parties involved. It's a delicate dance that requires sensitivity, wisdom, and a whole lot of patience.
The Supreme Court, in its role as interpreter of the Constitution, plays a crucial role in this balancing act. Its decisions have shaped the contours of religious freedom in America, sometimes sparking controversy and debate. But hey, that's what happens when you're dealing with such a fundamental right. It's bound to get messy.
Section 11. The Future of Faith and Freedom, an ongoing conversation. The First Amendment is a living document, constantly being interpreted and reinterpreted in light of new challenges and changing social norms. As America continues to diversify, the conversation about religious freedom is only going to get more complex. Issues like religious accommodation in the workplace, religious expression in public schools, and the use of religious freedom as a justification for discrimination are all likely to remain hot-button topics for years to come. Buckle up, folks, because this is one conversation that's far from over.
The future of faith and freedom in America depends on our willingness to engage in respectful dialogue, even when we disagree. It requires a commitment to upholding the rights of all Americans, regardless of their religious beliefs or lack thereof. And it demands a recognition that religious freedom, like all freedoms, comes with responsibilities. So let's keep talking, keep listening, and keep striving to create a society where everyone is free to live their truth.